It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
What are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better... Sheriff? Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Hi, this is Boehner W. from Phoenix, Arizona, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. We're going to be chatting with Thomas, and Thomas comes to us from Alabama. Kind of a country boy. He's grown up out in the woods, hunting, fishing, hiking. Spent most of his time growing up outdoors. And one day he was driving, and he saw this creature on the side of the road. Very fascinating account. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight, everyone. I want to welcome Thomas to the show. Thomas, thanks for coming on.
Hey, yes, sir. Thank you, Wilson. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know you had a pretty fascinating encounter when you were driving. I want to ask you, though, Thomas, for the audience listening, you're a country boy. You go out there, you're hunting, you're fishing, you're an outdoors guy. What was kind of your take on the whole Sasquatch subject prior to actually seeing this thing on the road?
Well, I never really put a whole lot of thought into it. It's one of those things growing up. I watched that, was it Harry and the Hendersons or whatever? And never really put a whole lot of thought into it. I wasn't a non-believer. I wasn't a believer. Just never really thought about it one way or the other, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and you and I were talking the other night, and I was telling you, you and I are kind of kindred spirits in a way because, when you're out there hunting, if you'd asked me prior to my sighting, I'd never heard anything, never seen anything, never, so when I hear hunters who go, I've been out in the woods my whole life, I've never seen anything, I tend not to give those guys a hard time because I get it. I understand exactly where they're coming from. But tell us about your sighting. When did this happen and kind of what were you doing, and walk us into it?
This was back in, I believe, 2008. I say that because when it happened, I really didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. Just kind of, saw it, and that was about the end of it, and didn't think no more of it until several years later. I was going to say, just because I didn't really pay any attention to it, I'm thinking it was around 2008. But I grew up and born and raised in Lee County, Alabama. And I was going to say, I grew up around there. When I was growing up, it was a more rural area than what it is now. Now there's been a lot of development in the area. But when I was growing up, my parents had bought me and my brother a four-wheeler, and So we could pull out of my parents' driveway, go about any direction we wanted to, ride all day, and never go down the same trail twice. I say all that to say, I mean, I knew the area good, had spent a lot of time out there in the woods, grew up hunting, grew up fishing, camping, all kind of stuff. And actually where the sighting was, where it happened, I've rode four-wheelers all over that place. And never before, not one time have I ever seen a footprint. I hear people talk about tree knocks, howls. There's never been anything that I've ever thought, was out of the ordinary. So when I actually saw it, it just kind of blew my mind because, I mean, I just thought even if Bigfoot does exist, it's not going to be around here because it's just too many, I've spent too much time in the woods. I would have seen it by now. But it was in 2008, the best of my memory. I was actually headed to work one morning, and while driving down the road, you had this area. It was on the left-hand side of the road, and there was like a bunch of thick hardwood trees there. Well, right after the hardwood trees ended is a place where they had gone in and clear cut. And so when they clear cut, I mean, they take everything out. And they had actually planted the pine trees back, and they had planted the pine trees, I don't know, maybe a couple of years before that back. And so the pine trees were probably around 5 feet tall, to the best of my memory. I'd been riding up in there, and up on top, it went up just a little bit of a hill, and up on top of the hill, it was a flat spot, and that's where they would actually load trucks and all that stuff when they had pupwood. And I'd actually rode up in there several times and parked and set up on there because you could actually see a good little ways, and it was a nice view. And I'd been riding up in there on the four-wheeler and stuff, and I'd stop, take a break there, and enjoy the view. And anyways, as I passed the thick hardwoods on the left, and it got to the actual pine thicket where the pine trees were, there was it was standing there, just standing there in the middle of the pine thicket. It was a dark brown. Best way I would describe it would be maybe like a dark chocolate lab is the best color I would be able to describe it with. I don't really hear too many people on the show. I listen to Sasquatch Chronicles, and I don't really hear too many people on your show with talking about a brown one. I mean, there may be a lot of people that have reported it, but I don't really remember too many of them talking about it. But it was just standing there on the side of the road, just I guess watching the cars go by. Not really sure what it was doing. I never saw it actually move. It wasn't walking or anything. It was just standing there in the trees. But I saw from like his chest up. When I saw it, I mean, it lasted a total of 4 or 5 seconds. And then right after I saw it, the road goes into a curve, and I went into a curve, and I didn't see it no more. And that was about it. I mean, it was a quick sighting, 4 or 5 seconds is pretty much all I saw of it. But
yeah, I know sometimes in those 4 or 5 seconds, it can seem to last for a lot longer. Time slows down in those weird moments. Out of those 4 or 5 seconds, was there any details that you remember?
To the best of my memory, like I say, I wished at the time, if I had to do over again, obviously I probably would have slammed on my brakes because this was, just kind of a country road down there. I mean, so there wasn't nobody in front, coming in front of me. There wasn't no traffic behind me. So I could have easily slammed on the brakes and it wouldn't have been an issue. So I wished I would have actually slammed on the brakes and maybe tried, getting a better view of this thing. Obviously, phone cameras didn't take the quality pictures then than what they do now. So I probably wouldn't have been able to get a good picture of it. But from what I can tell, it was right at 8 feet tall is what I would guesstimate, because the pine trees were about 5 feet. And I know that from riding four-wheeler over there. And he was probably about, I'm going to guess, 3 feet above that. I didn't see any hands. Like his hands were just down to his side. And without trying to exaggerate, I would say his shoulder width was at least 3.5 feet. I mean, he was a lot broader than any man I've ever seen. I mean, he was huge. from the angle I was, if it had a conical head, I couldn't tell it. It didn't look like a conical head to me. Best description I would give would be like a human head, more of that just round shape. Obviously a whole lot bigger than a human head. I mean, his head looked like it was two of mine. But yeah, I was going to say from the eyes, they were either brown or black. They were dark, but I mean, it was, I'm going to say 90, maybe 100 feet off the side of the road. So I couldn't really see at that distance to give you an exact eye color, but I mean, it was dark eyes. On his face, the best way to describe the face, I would say, is the face looked more human. Like on your show, I hear a lot of people say, well, it had, looked more animal to me, or, it looked like a gorilla or an orangutan or something. I didn't really feel that way. I felt like it looked more, best way I can describe it is like a human's face. He definitely had hair on the face. I've heard some people say it looked like they were balding on top, going bald. This one didn't. This one had, looked like a full head of hair. Definitely had hair all over his body, that dark brown hair, like I say. And the face, though, like the hair was more sparse. It didn't look like it was just super thick on his face. His lips, I mean, didn't really have any lips. The best way I could describe the lips would be, I guess you would say, kind of like a gorilla's lips. Like gorillas don't really like having lips. His nose, though, didn't look like a gorilla nose to me, which I guess maybe that's probably one of I guess the shape of the head and the nose is what, in my mind, gives it the more human-looking characteristic, the more human aspect, because the head didn't look conical like a gorilla. It just looked kind of more round. And the fact that the nose, he had a big wide nose on him, but the nostrils, like on a gorilla, you can like see up in the nostrils on a gorilla with the way they're shaped. And they have like that chisel shape to them. And with him, from what I could tell, I didn't look like I could see up into the nostrils or anything.
Yeah, it's a pretty good description. So they clear cut that area. I mean, they had gone through and clear cut it and replanted, is what it sounds like.
Oh yeah. It's just a private landowner. I was gonna say right there in that particular area. I think it's like 300 acres right there. But now that 300 acres butts up to, several other parcels of land. And the thing about it is, like, I've actually told a few people. I know most people around here that I've talked to, they ain't ever gonna mention Bigfoot. If they've seen it, I guess they just keep it to themselves. Me personally, I don't really care. I mean, if people believe me, they believe me. If they don't, they don't. I told my brother, and my brother laughed his head off. He thought it was hilarious. He thought I was joking. I was like, no, I'm serious. He said, Bigfoot doesn't exist, so there's no way you saw Bigfoot. So that's his reasoning is, if it doesn't exist, you can't see it. So he doesn't believe in it. Pretty much, I don't know, I'd say most people, I've probably told 10 or 12 people since then. And my parents believed me, but one of my friends believed me, but probably nobody else has ever believed me.
Yeah, and it's strange down there because there's a lot of reports down there in Alabama. They call them boogers, they call them no heads, as you and I were talking about the other night.
Yeah.
They have all kinds of names for them. Usually they'll name them after a certain location, like they'll call it the Devil Creek Monster, or some bizarre name, as opposed to Bigfoot or Sasquatch. When they replant those trees, and if it's 5 feet up and he's 3 feet above that thing's huge. That thing's huge.
Oh, it was. Oh yeah, it was huge, and that's exactly the thing that got me. Was like, I can specifically remember one guy I was telling about it. This was back just a couple of years ago. I was telling him, and because I was asking him, I was like, hey, do you believe in it? Because he told me, actually, he's my neighbor. I was going to say, he lives just a couple of houses down from me, and I live in a neighborhood, but the neighborhood I live in now is like bigger lots. Most people have 3 and 5 acre lots and stuff, behind the houses is just woods and all. He was talking about one night his dogs was going crazy barking, and he was just telling me about it, because right after we had moved into the neighborhood, me and my family, I was asking him, because I have kids and I wanted to kind of get a feel for the neighborhood. I said, hey, how's the neighborhood? You ever have any problems and everything? He said, no. And then he was just kind of telling me, he said one night he had his dog was going crazy. He said they were just barking. He said they don't normally do that. We have deer in this neighborhood and stuff. You'll see deer. It ain't uncommon for me to leave, go to work, and see deer run across the road. He said he saw, the dogs were barking, so he got the flashlight, and he was shining the flashlight into the woods behind his house, where his dogs were like barking towards. And he said he saw red eyes from the flashlight. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd, because I don't do a whole lot of spotlighting to shoot stuff or anything, but I've been, I just shine spotlight in the woods and different stuff and see what I see. And I've never come across any red eyes. I don't know. There may be a bunch of animals out there that have red eyes, but to my knowledge, I've not really seen a whole lot of red eyes. So that was just kind of interesting to me, because on your show sometimes I actually hear people talk about Bigfoot with red eyes. What that was or not, I don't know.
Yeah, it is a fascinating account. Red eyes are reported a lot. I would say yellow and kind of that orange green, kind of that orange color is reported the most, but I would say red's right up there. And you're right. I can't think of too many animals that actually have red eyes. I told the story before. One time I was in a field. We were actually on someone's property looking for these things. And I clicked on my light and I shined my light up and I saw all these red eyes looking back at me, and I about fell over, and they were cows. So cows have red eyes.
Scare me to death. Cows do. Okay. See, I don't really, because I've never been like spotlighting for deer or anything, which is obviously illegal around here, but I've never done it anyways. But I have, just drive down the road and shine the spotlight out, different things, just see what I can see. And I've never come across any red eyes. But the reason why I was telling about that is because I asked him, I said, well, I've heard Bigfoot has red eyes. I said, do you think that? And he just kind of laughed, he's like, Bigfoot don't exist. I said, well, how high off the ground were the eyes? He said, I don't know. He said, I didn't pay no attention to it. He said, they looked like they were probably up off the ground a little bit, but I didn't pay no attention. And that was about as far as that went. So who knows what it was, but I proceeded to tell him about my sighting. And I told him, and he said, well, Bigfoot ain't real. He said, how do you know that wasn't a guy in a costume? I said, well, for one, this is Alabama. There's a lot of people that carry guns in their vehicles. I said, that'd be a good way to get shot if you're going to be dressing up trying to look like a Bigfoot standing on the side of the road early in the morning. I said, also, unless that thing was standing up on, up on something, it was really tall. I said, and he filled the suit out. I said, for anything to be 3.5 feet wide, under the hair, like a bodybuilder's, they shave everything. So you can clearly see the muscle and all that. Well, on this, obviously he was covered in hair, and I say a he, I don't know if it's a he or, male or female, but I'm just saying he, but you could still see like the shoulders, the arms. This thing was massive, I said, there's no way in the world anybody could fill out a suit if that's fake. And he said, well, how do you know it wasn't like, blown up? And it was, they filled the suit up with air. And the best, I don't know, to me, the best thing I can say to that is anybody that has seen one, you can just tell that's not a suit. That's the best thing I can say. If you've not seen it, then you can come up with all these theories about, it's fake and this and that. But if you've ever seen it, there's just no way anybody got a suit that realistic. And there ain't no man on earth that I've ever seen. Andre the Giant wouldn't have compared to this guy, compared to this thing. It just, this thing would have made Andre the Giant look small. So
yeah,
that's kind of best description.
Seems like a lot of work though, too, to put on a suit, wait for someone to come down a country road, and to do what? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
let me ask
exactly.
you, Thomas, what do you make of that behavior of them? You hear a lot of eyewitnesses talk about, I mean, I've heard it more times than I can count, of people going down the road and here's this creature on the side of the road just kind of standing there watching traffic go by, which is weird behavior for such an elusive animal, but I've heard it so many times. What's your take on that behavior? As far as what is it bored? I mean, what's kind of your gut? I realize you're speculating, but I'm curious on your opinion.
Oh yeah. Now this is like you say. Nobody. I've heard you say on your show several times. Nobody has one in their basement that they're studying, well, except for probably the government. But I think they're kind of curious about us, just as people are curious about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call them. I think they're kind of curious about us. And I think sometimes they just, like him, he was kind of standing up on that hill, just watching cars go by. That's the only thing I can come up with. I mean, I really don't know because, he had to have heard me coming down the road. I mean, so, with 5-foot pine trees, if he'd have wanted to, he could have just crouched down in them trees. I'd have never seen him. He could have stood back up after I gone by, and I would have never have seen anything. So clearly, I kind of look at it as he let me see him, by standing there, because clearly you heard my truck coming down the road. I guess just curiosity. I really
Just
couldn't
kind of
answer that one.
boredom or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of, as I ride by and look and see him and find it interesting. I guess he was kind of looking at me, finding me interesting. I don't know. Maybe they wonder, why we ride around in these things, vehicles, that is.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously their lifestyle is much different than ours. Maybe they wondered why we're always on the go and always so busy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm kind of curious. A lot of times after eyewitnesses see these things, in cars it's a different story. You're in your car, you're heading a direction, and you're not. It's not quite as confrontational as, let's say, you were hunting and you came within 80, 90 feet of this thing. And I'm curious, as you were driving off, kind of what was going through your mind. I mean, I know you didn't slam on your brakes and go back, but I'm kind of curious what was kind of going in through your mind at the time.
Well, that's the funny thing, Now, looking back, I'm like, dang, I wish I'd have done that a lot differently. At the time, I saw it, and I was looking at it, and, literally right after seeing it, you kind of start to go into this curve, and it goes down a hill, and it's a pretty sharp curve. So I was probably only doing 40, 45 miles an hour, 45 tops, probably more like 40. And so, I mean, I got a decent look at it. Like I say, it was probably 90 feet, maybe 100 feet off the side of the road. I looked at it, and verbally I didn't say anything, but in my head I thought, what the heck is that? That's what I was saying in my head. And even though I knew what I was looking at, I didn't think these things really existed. I'd never really put any thought into it one way or the other. And really, I kind of looked at it and thought to myself, what the heck is that? And I just kept on driving. And at the time, I never thought any more of it. It was, I want to say probably 5 years later, maybe. There was actually one of my friends, he was talking about, he lives, the way the crow flies, he probably lives three miles actually from where the sighting was. And he was telling me he has 2 big pit bulls. And I actually had 2 pit bulls. And he was telling me, he was like, he goes and walks his dogs over here on this property. Not the property where I had the sighting at, but I mean, like I say, about the way the crow flies, probably 3 miles from there. And he was telling me, he's like, man, he said, I took my dogs for a walk the other day, and he always would take them for a walk, and then it was just on some property. He knew the guy that owned the property, and the guy didn't care. And so he would go walking down through the trails and all that stuff. And he said, my dogs, I mean, most time pit bulls, people think pit bulls are mean dogs. It's all in the way you raise them. Most pit bulls, I've had several pit bulls, and they're all big babies.
Biggest baby on the planet, man. I have one myself.
I'm like,
yep.
Yeah, I'm like, they ain't gonna, people are scared of them. I'm like, they ain't gonna bother you. But pit bulls ain't scared in the woods, I'm like, they'll be running, playing. They ain't scared of much out there. And we don't really have any bear or nothing like that down here. I mean, I've seen a cougar like once or twice. I've never seen a black bear, but so I say that to say there's really nothing in the woods that's going to be a predator, to a pit bull, and because coyotes don't want to have nothing to do with them. And anyways, he was talking to me. He said he was walking his dogs, and he said they're always 10, 15 feet out in front of me, sniffing, running around, playing, having fun on the walk because they loved it. And he said, well, that day, he said he was walking. He said they were scared. Just, he said, I've never seen them that scared before. He said the first part of the walk, they were fine. He said, and then all of a sudden it was like they got wind of something, smelt something. He said, or they knew something I didn't know. And he was talking about they just staying right next to him. They were kind of whimpering. They didn't act like they wanted to do, all they wanted to do was get back to the house, basically. And he actually believes in Bigfoot. He's one of the few people I know of that'll actually say, yeah, I believe it exists. Now, he said he's never seen one, but he just believes they exist. And he was telling me, he said, I kind of wonder if that wasn't a Bigfoot in the area or something that they were picking up on. He said, because I just don't know what is in the woods out there that's going to make two pit bulls, they're not just alone. They're both together and they got me. And they're acting that fearful. He said, I've just never seen my dogs act like that. And so when he said that, it kind of jogged my memory of like, dang, I saw one before. And up until that point, I had never really thought about it anymore. I had totally forgot about it. And when he mentioned that, it kind of, I guess, jogged my memory, made me remember what I saw. And then it kind of piqued my interest of like, could I really have seen one? Is that really what I saw? Do they really exist? And at that point, I started trying to do some research into it. And, I'm not a researcher, as people call themselves, or nothing like that, but just, watching some videos and trying to read about it and just, seeing what I can find, whatever I come across, I'd check into it. And that's when I kind of started believing. To me, I started hearing about stuff like, I actually watched the Patterson-Gimlin film. And when I watched that video, to me, that's nobody in a costume. The way that thing walks and the way it moves, its body ratios and everything, that's not a human. And so that was kind of proof to me to think, okay, that was a real, animal or whatever you want to call it. That was a real thing. And I started learning about, the dermal ridges, and then I just recently, found out more about the DNA study that I think Melba Ketchum did and all that type stuff. And so essentially for 4 to 5 years after I saw it, I never really even thought any more of it. I saw it that morning, and that was pretty much the end of it as far as it went, until my friend told me about that. And I do find that interesting because, obviously he said he never saw nothing. He never smelt nothing, anything. He said no rocks were thrown at him. He didn't hear no growls or nothing, but he said it was just really weird that his dogs was acting so scared because he had never seen them like that. And it's just kind of an interesting something to think about.
It is interesting. Let me ask you, have you been back to that area where you had the sighting? Have you taken your four-wheeler through there or anything?
Yeah, and that's the crazy part. Yeah. I actually probably 5 miles the way the crow flies. I actually, it's only 13 acres and ain't much land, but I own 13 acres, probably 5 miles away the crow flies from there. I was going to say I don't live on the land. It's just an empty lot. But, I've been hunting on that property and everything. I have trail cams out there. I've never seen anything. I've been riding all over that place since. I've never seen anything. I haven't been out there in a few years. This place has changed a lot since I grew up. It was a lot more rural. Now there's a lot more development going on. They're putting houses in everywhere, it seems like. And a lot of the landowners have changed. So the people that have bought the land and all that, they won't let nobody on it no more. Back when I used to ride out there, it was a, kind of older gentleman that would own the land. They didn't care. Well, now they've passed away and their kids have sold it, and so new people have owned it. So I can't even go on the land anymore. But I have been out there. There were still a couple of years after I saw it. I rode four-wheelers out there, and all that, and I've never to this day seen a footprint, heard a wood knock, heard a howl, what's really in this whole area, I know you talked about on your the show, like in East Texas, you said when it gets dark, man, it just turns into a jungle out there. You just about can't be out there and not hear something. That's what's so strange to me is, now I'm only speaking for my area. The rest of Alabama may be completely different, but in this area, I've never heard anything. I don't really understand why. It's like they're totally non-vocal in this particular area, to my experience, anyways.
Yeah, and I appreciate sharing that. I mean, it is one of those things, like I told you, that's the reason why I don't give hunters a hard time, because I was that guy at one time. I've been hunting my whole life, never heard anything, never saw anything. And, I'd sleep out underneath the tree in a sleeping bag, no tent, no nothing. You won't catch me doing that now. It is strange, though. And you're part of a hunting club. And this is a type of encounter I hear a lot from hunters. You had a buddy at a hunting club. Do you mind sharing that story?
Yeah. This was maybe a week and a half ago. I was going to say, now this is a different county. This is up in Tallapoosa County. Anybody that knows the area, it would be up near Lake Martin. And up there near Lake Martin, I'm in a hunting club up there. And it's I can't say this is at all Bigfoot related, but still down here in Alabama right now, it's bow season, which I don't do a whole lot of bow hunting, just because it takes more time and practice getting out there and scouting around, getting closer to them. I'm kind of more just, I'd rather go out there with a rifle and be done with it. But rifle season will be coming here in a couple of weeks, and so he was out there bow hunting. Well, this is an older gentleman that is, experienced bow hunter. He also hunts with a crossbow, which in my opinion is a little bit more effective than just hunting with a compound bow. He shot a 6-point, and not a massive deer, but he was just trying to put some meat in the freezer, first deer of the season. So he said he went ahead and shot it, made a very good shot, and it is an experienced hunter. So in my mind, that tells me he should know what a good shot is and what a bad shot is. He says he made a very good shot, is what he told me. And he said he heard the deer run a little ways. He heard it drop in the woods. And so he gave it some time. He said, an adequate time of what he thought it should be to bleed out, which I know a lot of people probably think that's a horrible thing to do, but I mean, that's just part of hunting. So he let the deer bleed out. He took his time getting out of the stand, went over there to where he, heard the deer run to, where he shot it at, found a good blood trail, followed the blood trail, led right to where he heard the deer run to, to where it stopped. And an injured deer, they're at that point, they're injured. They're shot. They're not trying to get up and quietly get through the woods and get away from you. So if that deer jumped up when he went walking up there, it would seem to me, from my experience, that you're going to hear the deer get up and run off. Especially this time of the year, all the leaves are still falling. A lot of them are off the trees. A lot of them are still on the trees. So it's really loud. I mean, if that deer ran through the woods, you would definitely hear it. But he said when he got over there, the deer blood trail stopped. There was a huge puddle of blood on the ground where it looked like the deer had laid down, bled out. And he said there was no deer. And he said that, he thought, well, and he's one of them, he doesn't believe in no kind of Bigfoot, Sasquatch or nothing. So he said, well, I guess, I didn't give it enough time. And he said, it apparently jumped up and ran off as I was walking up there. I said, well, did you hear it? He said, no, I didn't hear anything. He said, I never heard nothing. I said, well, did you see a blood trail, where it got up and started running again? He said, no, didn't see anything. I said, so you didn't see any signs of where it got up and ran off. It just wasn't there. He said, yeah, wasn't there. He said, I guess I just pushed it, and it probably ran off and died. So he, chalks that up to the deer just didn't die yet and got up and ran off. I kind of wonder, and I have obviously no evidence or proof of this, but it is interesting because I've heard on your show several times people talking about they'll shoot a deer and Bigfoot comes in, takes the deer and walks off with it. Well, it's kind of interesting to think that he did find a big old puddle of blood. I kind of wonder if that's not what happened, you know.
I mean, after you shoot a deer and it takes off, you obviously wait for it to die, but I mean, hunters will spend hours looking for a deer. The worst thing, I mean, it's amazing when you talk to hunters. They're very empathetic. They feel terrible if they can't find a deer after they've shot it. And for it just to, there's a puddle of blood and the deer is gone. You hear a lot of these vanishing deer accounts on the show.
And I didn't mention it to you in the interview before when I was talking to you, but he said he looked for this thing for like 2.5 hours. He said, and then it started raining, so he just quit and left. But he walked around looking for like 2.5 hours for this deer.
Yeah.
Never found another drop of blood. Never found, to me, he should have at least found where the deer ran a little bit more and laid down, because if the deer's been shot and it's ran that far, it's lost that much blood that he found a big puddle of blood. I mean, realistically, I don't think the deer has enough life left in it to just run. You know what I mean?
No.
The deer's going to run a little ways, lay back down again, you would think.
You would think, and even that's rare. But even if they do that, it's not going to be far from the puddle of blood. Let me ask you, what do you think that Sasquatch is? What's kind of your opinion, Thomas?
My opinion, now, everybody has different thoughts on it. Me personally, I was born and raised in church. I am saved. I consider myself a Christian, and, so I have to believe in the Bible. I don't believe in evolution. Anybody that does, that's up to them. I ain't stepping on no toes. But I'm just saying, I don't believe in the evolution and, the thought of we all evolved and all that kind of stuff. So to me, I kind of go back to the idea of, like in Genesis 6, it talks about like the Nephilim and things. Now, one thing that I do find perplexing about that is the best way I could describe what I saw is if there was no such thing as Bigfoot, and somebody said, "What'd you see?" To me, I would literally give a description of, if you take a gorilla and you take a human and you mix the two, that's what I saw. I guess, except a whole lot bigger. But I mean, that's literally about what Bigfoot looks like. Any pictures I see of Bigfoot or anything, that's always what I think of. So it looks just like a human and a gorilla that has been mixed, and just on a lot bigger scale. So to me, I take it as something of that nature. Is the Nephilim necessarily, so to say? I don't know, but I definitely think it's something on that line. I do believe it's something more than just, Gigantopithecus that a lot of people believe, or a lot of people say it's a smart animal. I personally think the doggone things are smarter than we are. Now, a lot of people find that insulting just because people like to think that we're the smartest thing on earth. But, if that's the case, then I don't mean to offend anyone, but, to me, I definitely believe they are very intelligent. And one reason, too, why I kind of tend to think part of the Nephilim theory is that would imply they have a little bit of I guess maybe you'd call it supernatural in them. And to me, that theory would really, you could just about answer all questions of Bigfoot with that theory. The reason why I say that is, I know I've heard on your show some people talk about they have actually shot and killed these things. Maybe it was the Siege of Hanoba, I think. The two brothers that was basically camped out at the house. The wife had left with the kids, said, "You take care of this thing." The two brothers were there, and they said that one came up and they actually shot it. And then they sat there and listened and watched it die. And when they walked out there to go get it, another one came out of the woods and grabbed it. I think that was that episode, right?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. So to me, okay, they sit there. I mean, you can say, well, those guys are liars. Okay, well, then you can say everybody that ever comes on this show is a liar. I mean, all we have is testimonies to go by. So I believe the guys. I think that really did happen. They really did shoot it. I think it really did die. So that one died. But then other people say they shoot them. It don't really seem to have a whole lot of effect on them. And I think that goes back to, if, a couple has children, well, one child may tend to take more after the mother. One child may tend to take more after the father. And so I think depending on how much, I guess you could say, human DNA these things have in them, you might be able to kill them, depending on how much more of the supernatural, if you want to call it that, DNA they have in them. You can't kill them. Also, some people claim that they see these things cloaked, like the predator is what they call it. Well, if I ever saw that personally, I'd probably have a heart attack. It'd probably scare me to death. I don't care to see one of these darn things cloaked. But maybe that's the ones that have a little bit more of the supernatural, the ones that can do mind speak, things of that nature. Maybe that's more of the supernatural side of it. The ones that can't, don't. Also, you hear about some of these that are super aggressive for no apparent reason. They just seem to have it out for people. Maybe that's part of that Nephilim DNA, because the Nephilim DNA is supposed to be essentially kind of like fallen angels. And so, you could argue that's kind of that Nephilim side coming out. But then others, I've heard stories about, they actually help people. Well, maybe that's because they're a little bit more human and they tend to have a little bit more compassion towards humans. I don't know. I mean, that's just my theory. Obviously, like you said before, I don't have one in the basement, so I can't say that for sure. But it's definitely pretty interesting when you go back and look at the DNA studies that Melba Ketchum did. And even her DNA study, in my opinion, tends to kind of coincide with that theory. And I could definitely answer a lot of questions and that people come on, like that I hear on your show, when people are describing these things. A lot of it kind of rings a bell in my head and says that one has a little bit more Nephilim DNA, that one has a little bit more human DNA, that sort of aspect to it. Whether or not I'm right, who knows? It doesn't really even matter if I am, but that's my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. It's definitely an interesting take on, what they are. And, there's no wrong answer to that question because no one really knows. But, the Nephilim were gods and kings. I mean, they were important people. They weren't necessarily animals running around. But having said that, if you really look into that Genesis 6 Genesis 6 story, of what actually happened there. And I'm not a Christian, but I'm fascinated by it, and I've researched it, a lot. And what's fascinating is the abominations, the half man, half animals. Like the Greeks called them minotaurs, and they had different names, depending on what it was mixed with. And applying your theory to that would actually make sense as far as what's going on. Makes you wonder where they came from and how long they've been around, though. Going based on your theory.
If you want to apply the Bible theory, now this is one thing why I say my theory, I can't explain every aspect of it, is the great flood that happened in the Bible. How did they survive the flood? I mean, I don't know. So kind of things like that kind of make me have questions and wonder. But, I don't really have no idea. One question I did want to ask you, though, is do you get a lot of reports of the, dark chocolate brown, like I was describing? Most people I hear on your show talk about black or, gray or red. I know that red, I guess auburn color, you could call it a lot. But I don't really remember too many people talking about brown.
Yeah, I've actually had a lot of reports of them being brown.
Have you?
I would say black is probably the most common color, and then the auburn, kind of that reddish color people talk about, and then the gray seems to be the next. Most people describe the face being kind of gray looking, kind of that battleship gray color. But I have heard of it being that chocolate brown, kind of that, in between black and be in between black and like a true brown, kind of a chocolate brown. I've definitely heard that before. It's a fascinating account. It makes me really wonder what they're doing on the side of roads. I've heard truck drivers that have seen them, people who are just heading to work. I did a member show and a lady dropped off her daughter to work and she was driving home, ran into this dogman thing that was standing next to the road. Even the dogman seems to stand on the side of the road. and kind of watch cars. Makes me wonder if it's boredom or what they're doing with that. It's so bizarre.
Yeah.
Like I said, for an elusive creature, it's bizarre behavior. You'd never see a cougar do that. Sit on the
No.
side of the road and watch cars. You know what I mean?
No. And what is so interesting is I actually have, like I say, grown up around here hunting, fishing. I have game cameras in the woods right now. And obviously I know they exist around here. I've never seen a bobcat in this area. Not one. Now, I have other people say they've seen bobcats. I've never seen a bobcat. Never even had one of on my game cams. But yet I saw this thing, so by saying that, it makes me wonder, how rare are these things really? Are they just really good at hiding, really good at staying elusive, really good at staying away from people? Or are they just really, really rare? Because some people say, well, there can't be more than a handful of them around. Well, I mean, at this point, I've seen more Bigfoot than I ever have bobcat, which is crazy to say. But it makes me wonder, how many of them is there out there? I mean, it definitely in this area, there's plenty of wild game around here. I mean, they could definitely, because I know tons of people with goats and chickens. Heck, I have goats and chickens. I've never heard of anybody really having problems with their chickens disappearing, their goats disappearing. Well, why do they need to? They have tons of deer. There's deer all over this area. I know as of, I think it was around 5 or 6 years ago, I actually read a thing that said Alabama has more wild turkey than any state. So that kind of shocked me. I didn't know there was that many wild turkey around here.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and the Alabama Game of Wild Fish Digest thing, it was telling me that. And now, I don't know if that's still the case. That was several years ago. But so I say that to say there's plenty of wild game around here. There's creeks and streams everywhere you go. So, there's plenty of habitat for them. It just kind of makes me wonder, is there more of these out there? Is the population greater and a lot more of them than what most people think? I don't know.
Let me ask you, if you had the opportunity to shoot one, would you take it?
Personally, I wouldn't shoot one. Just because, well, if it was endangering my life and I felt threatened, I'd shoot the thing in a heartbeat. But just, if it wasn't bothering me, I wouldn't shoot one, just because I'm that way even with animals. I was raised up, if you kill it, you eat it. If you're not going to eat it, don't kill it. And, so to me, you're taking a life, whether it be, a deer or a turkey or a rabbit or anything else. If you take its life, then you owe it to that thing to at least, eat it. You don't waste it. And so out of respect for life, no, I wouldn't shoot one. I ain't exactly going to throw anybody under the bus that does. I realize that that's probably what it would take, is actually somebody shooting one, dragging it out, and exposing it to the world to ever prove these things exist. I think you'd have a hard time doing that with the government, because I definitely believe they are covering the stuff up. But, personally, I wouldn't shoot one. Also, I think you're probably going to need something, I don't know, I'd say at least a 7 mag or bigger to even have a chance of taking one of these things down. And I know I've heard on your show that if you ever see one, there's probably a couple more back there that you don't see. So I wouldn't recommend it unless your life's in danger. But I personally, I wouldn't shoot one. But
yeah, and I respect your answer. I respect your answer very much. It's commendable. I wish I had that type of respect, because I would shoot one, but I also respect the fact that you take a life, you eat it. I grew up that way, so I know exactly where you're coming from on it.
I was listening. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was listening to your show. It was a couple of days ago. I don't remember what episode it was. I think it was in 300s or something. But the guy that was talking about, he was hunting wild hogs in California, and the things killed his dogs. He was out there hog hunting, and they killed his dogs, and he just absolutely hated these things. If they ever killed my dogs, I probably would have it out for them. I was going to say, I would probably have to be pretty vengeful about that one.
Yeah.
I was going to say, but I would probably be out there wanting to hunt every single one of them down for vengeance. You kill my dog, and I mean, you ain't gonna get along very well. So I treat my dogs about like my kids. You don't mess with my dogs. That's what I'm saying, unless there's gonna be hell to pay. So under those circumstances, yeah. But me, I just had I guess it's a good encounter of just seeing one on the side of the road, not bothering nothing. Some of these people I hear on your show, if I had their encounters, yeah, I'd probably be thinking, kill them all.
Yeah,
So.
I hear you. I'm kind of the same way. You harm my dog, I wouldn't be out to prove them. I'd be out hunting them, killing them every chance I got.
Oh yeah, forget to prove them. I'd just be killing them.
Yeah, I'd mow the forest, burn the forest down.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I've got a couple of guns that I feel pretty confident would take them down. So I'd probably be testing that theory just to see if I could.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel the same way, Thomas. And I know you have a pit bull, and I have a pit bull, and they're like kids after a while, man. They're family. I had a dog that died a couple of years ago, and I was I was in tears for like 3 weeks, man. I'm embarrassed to admit that, but I was so broken up over that dog. That dog had been with me through everything, and I think after this pit bull goes, I think I'm done with dogs. It's too painful to watch them go. You know what I mean?
Well, and to each their own on that. There's no problem with that. But I say every time one passes away, there's another one out there that is just as good as that one that needs somebody to love them. I know that a lot of people probably think that sounds stupid, but that's kind of how I look at it. So I say, you know what? I'm going to take another one in under my wing and treat it just as good. I had a pit bull. I still have another one now, but I had one of them. She died October 6th. And people thought I was stupid. I bought a doggone marble marker, headstone marker, and put on the grave of her, had her picture put on it with her name, whole 9 yards. People were like, you spent all that money on, a headstone for a dog? I was like, well, I love that dog.
Yeah.
So,
I've shed more tears over dogs and
stupid.
I've shed more tears over dogs than family members that have died. So, I mean, hell, well, I'm all for. I mean, I'm with you, man. I
hate to say it, but my dog treated me a whole lot better than my grandma. So, yeah. Oh man, I'm glad nobody knows my last name on this show. They'll think, man, that's awful, but but it's the truth of it. So, yeah. But just out of I had discussed with you before the reason why I think the government covers this stuff up. If you don't want to go into that, that's perfectly fine.
Give us your take on
it. But what did you think about what I had to say? Like, do you think there's any credibility to that? Or?
Well, for the audience, give us your take on why the government's covering it up.
Okay. Well, now this is just my thought. Once again, you have to be, believing in the Bible. Now, to say to believe in the Bible, I know I've heard you talk about on your show. You believe in the paranormal. You believe in demonic stuff, right? You said you've experienced that your own self.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very real.
Yeah. So I say to that, I know some people that'll believe in that, but then they don't believe in God, so to say, or they don't believe in, Satan, if you want to call him Satan. Well, I don't really know how you can believe that there's demonic stuff, because if we all evolved and evolution's true, where did demonic spirits come from? You know what I mean? So I don't really understand the idea behind that. So I say that not to step on anybody's toes or make any enemies out there. Anyone that's listening to the show, if they disagree, I mean, hey, man, that's fine. I totally fine with anybody disagreeing with me. But by saying that, I believe in the Bible. I believe in creation. I believe there's a God. I believe there's Satan. And so there's good things in this world and there's bad things in this world. And the not putting down on any teachers out there. I actually have family members that are teachers, and I think they're worth their weight in gold. But I'm just saying the public school system teaches evolution, and evolution is definitely the mainstream opinion out there that's put out. Universities, colleges, all the way from just about kindergarten these days are teaching evolution. And I really don't feel like the government's worried about the money. The government gives so much money away, they'll just tax us more if they need any. They've proven that. So I don't think it's a thing of. I've heard a lot of people say, "Well, I don't think I think the government's covering it up because they're worried about the money aspect. People will stop going to the national forest, or it's going to hurt the timber industry or things of that nature." I don't think the government cares about none of that. This is just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt, but I think the government covers this stuff up because if it come out and they said, yes, Bigfoot does exist, and people are actually able to study these things and that sort of stuff, well, they're going to find out that it does have that supernatural DNA like I talk about. And it kind of goes back to a little bit of the Nephilim. Well, what does that prove? That proves the Bible's real and evolution is false. So the government don't want to do that, because then they have to admit that what they're teaching in schools is basically wrong. And I think that's the whole thing. The government doesn't want you to believe that because they want you to believe in evolution. That's what they're teaching. And they don't want you to believe in, basically God and Satan and heaven and hell and all that stuff. And so since the government doesn't want people believing in that, they want you believing in evolution, then they're not going to allow anything to be exposed that contradicts what they're teaching. And that's just my thoughts on it. I'm like, there's not really any other good explanation that I can come up with as to why they'd be covering this stuff up. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, you could be right. You definitely could be right. It's kind of like the giants they dug up. We've dug up a lot of giants in North America, and it seems to be swept under the rug, since about the 19th century, actually 18th century. And so it makes you wonder why does all this stuff seem to vanish overnight?
And I think that's because they're wanting to, I hate to say it, a lot of people disagree with that. The government wants to keep people dumbed down. They want people to be stupid. They want people dumbed down. They don't want people knowing the truth about stuff. And so if they can erase some of the stuff that they're actually finding to kind of forget about that ever existing in history, then they're keeping you dumbed down. So I think that's kind of their whole agenda, is keep people dumbed down, keep people so that they just think that what you see now is all that's ever been, in other words. Does that make sense? And they don't want you knowing there was actually giants that existed or any of that type stuff. So hey, if we dig up giants, we got to sweep that under the rug, because that goes against what we're wanting people to know. Because I believe the government's only going to allow you to know what they want you to know. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I would agree with you as a whole regarding that. I mean, the government definitely wants people dumbed down. The mob they can control. As crazy as that sounds, an individual is smart. A mob is that mob mentality, and you see it with politics. You see it with everything else these days. You definitely have a good point. It's definitely something to think about. But Thomas, I appreciate you taking the time to come on, man, and share what happened to you and your thoughts on things, man. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Oh yes, sir. I just wanted to ask you one question. I know you said you gave up hunting. Do you still hunt anymore at all, or have you totally quit it?
I quit. Yeah, I quit.
Did you?
Yeah.
See, I hope that never happens to me. I had a good experience, I guess you'd say, with seeing one. I hope I don't have those experiences like what you had, because I think that would bother me a lot. But I just wanted to ask you about that. I know you've mentioned that on the show, and I didn't know if you ever got back out there or not. Maybe I'm a little bit crazy. Maybe I'm a little bit off my rocker. And it could just be because I haven't had one of those really hostile experiences. But I look at it as, I'm not getting out of this world alive. If I go out there and I go hunting and one kills me, then one kills me. But I'm not gonna let them steal my joy. I'm gonna keep hunting anyway. So, but I don't blame you a bit. I've listened to your encounter. I think it was the second episode, and I listened to it. And yeah, if I had that happen, I probably would never go back in the woods. So, but I do appreciate you allowing me this time to come on here, and I appreciate you giving everybody a platform to talk to. And I've listened to your show for a long time, and I've thought about submitting my encounter, but I thought, well, it was kind of a boring encounter compared to what most of what you have on your show is, so I never submitted it, but I figured I'd submit it anyway. So I appreciate you letting me come on the show.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. I think they're all fascinating, and never lose that love for being outdoors. That's for sure. But Thomas, thank you again.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, Wes. I appreciate it. You have a good night.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.
My wheels unturned to go alone. Baby, you should know that you're gone. With the lights on, this is my home. Place where I own memories of you, dear. And in your eyes, close it, the skies are mesmerized. Memories of you, dear. I saw moon as a human and rider.